Bene, buonasera a tutti gli amici, vado a fare l'applauso come al solito, vediamo chi è in linea, ancora nessuno, bene, intanto vado a mettere in diretta anche il podcast audio sul gruppo Facebook, andiamo nel gruppo, eccolo qui. Via, messo anche il podcast. Ciao Paolo, buonasera. Ditemi anche se l'audio è funziona. In questo caso ho perso la diretta video ma non audio con David. David, comunque dammi una voce, mi senti bene? Do you copy, David?
Yes,
good job.
I hear you perfectly and I can see you.
Well, I'm going to turn off my camera such a way I can save a little of band. But, well, so it's better. Well, I'm seeing you now. Why? Because I turn off my camera. Well, so it's better that the audience, the world gamers can see you. Ciao Diego, ciao Paolo. Stasera mi sentirete ovviamente parlare un pochino in italiano, un po' in inglese, qualche volta anche in spagnolo, però non vi preoccupate. Vado a mettere a tutto schermo la schermata perché stasera, come al solito, per avere una diretta live non con il mio programma solito ma con Restream, per avere il nostro diciamo designer David Gomez in diretta. Dunque ecco, penso che lo potete sia vedere che sentire. Capisce l'italiano, comunque David understands the Italian, but he prefers obviously speaking English. Paolo, obviously Paolo is making some joke, arriba. Paolo is another our war gamer that loves joking. Signori, vediamo un po' se adesso mi posso anch'io vedere. Come vedete ho cambiato software per oggi proprio perché dovevo ospitare il nostro designer David Gomez. Intanto vado a fare una panoramica sul gioco perché lo sto provando in diretta. Bene, poi andrò anche a mettere in evidenza la schermata. Fatemi trovare un attimo, ecco, torno sullo speaker principale. Bene signori, perché abbiamo oggi David Gomez Relloso in diretta? Perché tramite un amico spagnolo, Claudio Ioldi, ciao Luca, buonasera, che giustamente mi ha sempre parlato in maniera positiva del gioco di David, e io sono un pochino, non lo conosco bene, ho giocato tantissimo a Pazzo Glory, ma purtroppo il Crusade Revolution l'ho giocato molto poco e non è molto dissimile da Pazzo Glory, e quindi stasera, al di là, prima di andare a spiegare il gioco, che poi ci sarà David che ci andrà a spiegare, farò le 10 domande a David. Ricordatevi che venerdì prossimo avremo Philip Hardy e presumo fra 2 settimane Mike Bertuselli e fra 3 settimane avremo Tai Bomba. Quindi avremo tutti, spero, a meno che di rinvii, una serie di, diciamo, interviste con questi designer che tanto ci fanno giocare. E ora vado a presentare David e parlerò in inglese, poi ascolterò David nelle sue risposte, le abbiamo preparate proprio per evitare, diciamo, di perdere tempo, e poi andrò alla fine di ogni risposta di David a tradurre per passare successivamente alla seconda, diciamo alla successiva domanda. David, well, I have quickly introduced you, what Claudio Ioldi told me about. Very quickly, I told something about Pazzo Glory, but now it's time to introduce you, and obviously we have prepared 10 questions, and I invited everyone to make further questions about, curiosities, some doubts that you have about the mechanics, but, we are going to do that later. So, David, you have already told me where you live, but let's discover who is David Gomez? Where do you live, or what do you do in your life? Well, tell me something about you.
Ciao, saludos a tutti. Grazie, or thank you for letting me being here. And I live in a very, very small village. We only live 16 people, and the village is called Dobro.
Well, David, I'm going to show where is Dobro. Just a moment. Well, Dobro is, well, guys, please notice. Well, please look at my finger. Dobro is here. Well, so let's continue, David, please.
Yeah, it was like a joke and a privilege being the designer. I put the village on the map. But I was not born in Dobro. I was born in San Sebastian. That is quite close from Dobro on the map. It's in the northern part of Spain and the coast, very close to France.
Real Sociedad. David, Real Sociedad. Well, San Sebastian, guys.
San Sebastian. So I studied history. I worked as a social educator with young people for 10 years, and I changed my life and went to this small village and opened a very small rural hotel.
A sort of bed and breakfast, David?
What?
A sort of bed and breakfast?
Yes, yes, but in the rural, in the countryside.
I see.
Yeah, but now we are closed.
Wow, I'm sorry.
The last year we have been closed for the epidemic, but we will reopen as soon as possible.
I hope, yes. In fact, that's a problem for you entrepreneurs that are running a bed and breakfast or small hotels. So I can realize your problems. But obviously, I hope that you can survive, David, also thanks to your war game, Crusade and Liberation. David, give me 3 minutes to sum up what you have just said. Ovviamente, ragazzi, ecco, penso che abbiate capito perché David sta parlando anche lentamente per essere più compreso dal pubblico italiano. In ogni caso, Dobro è un villaggio di 16 anime, è stato inserito sulla mappa giusto per un joke, per uno scherzo. Avete sentito che David ha lavorato come teacher di young people, come educator, ha usato il termine educator, come teacher di young people, e poi ha deciso di cambiare lavoro e ha aperto questo piccolo hotel, questo bed and breakfast. Lui è nativo di San Sebastian. Pay attention to the stress, non San Sebastian, ma San Sebastian. Is it correct, David? Well, so I never respect the stresses so well. E quindi adesso spera che il lockdown sia over, che sia finito, e tornerà a gestire il suo bed and breakfast. Ma adesso, dato che abbiamo saputo qualcosa in brevemente sulla biography di David, entriamo nel dettaglio, e la seconda domanda che gli vado a fare sarà: perché ha deciso di creare questo Crusade and Revolution. So, David, I have just finished to translate into Italian. Let's continue with our interview about, well, obviously it's a sort of rhetorical question. Why did you decide to create your creation? So, Crusade and Revolution. And as I told you some days ago, well, you dedicated your game especially to your grandfather and grandmother. You're up, David. You can proceed.
Yes, I knew two grandparents. The other two died when I was a child, so their names appear on the game. David, the same name. They put to me my name for my grandfather, and Juana was my grandmother, and they lived the Spanish Civil War, and in both sides, one in the Republican and the other in the nationalist side.
That's very weird.
Since I was a child, I heard stories, very interesting stories about the war told by my grandparents. Later, I studied history, and this, like any other historical event, I was interested on it. And when I started playing war games, well, I said, well, I want to play a war game about the Spanish Civil War, but I could not find any. There were very few games at that time. Later, there have been published more games, but at that time, about 23 more or less, there wasn't nearly any game, and some of them were very old, from old companies, and I couldn't find them. They were out of stock. I tried a pair of other games, and I didn't like them. So I decided, well, if I cannot find a game about this topic, I will have to design it. And at that time, I was playing a lot, and I was in love with Paths of Glory, so I decided to combine those two things. Use the mechanics, the game system of Paths of Glory, because being about the Great War, the First World War, I thought that it could be, it fixed very well to the Spanish Civil War, because the Spanish Civil War, even if sometimes we see it as a prelude to the Second World War, actually it has it's more similar to First World War than to Second World War, except, for example, the airplanes. The air war, yes, was very modern, but all the other combats were more similar to First World War. So I decided to begin that project, and that's how everything started.
Well, David, I see. Well, obviously, ribadisco che lui aveva sentito queste storie sulla guerra fra nazionalisti e repubblicani da sua nonna e suo nonno, che paradossalmente erano su two sides, una da una parte e l'altro dall'altra, e li ha sempre, diciamo, insomma, li ha sempre più che ammirati, ha sempre ascoltato i loro racconti, e a un certo punto ha deciso di creare questo gioco, anche perché dato che lui giocava con i wargame, però c'era questa assenza, ed è vero, I'm going to speak English just a moment. There was this sort of absence about a strategical wargame about the Spanish Civil War. Quindi è questo il problema, non c'era un bel gioco strategico che poteva comprendere tutti quei fatti che lui aveva ascoltato dai nonni, ma di cui, diciamo, aveva studiato. Quindi, alla luce di questa mancanza di pochi giochi, anche vecchi, ha deciso appunto di creare Crusade and Revolution. E un'altra cosa, ha notato che le meccaniche, la guerra della Spanish Civil War era più vicina alla prima guerra mondiale che alla seconda guerra mondiale. Per quanto riguarda l'utilizzo di aeroplani che forse sì, c'erano le prime avvisaglie di quello che sarebbe stato l'aeroplano moderno alla seconda guerra mondiale, ma molto vicino alla prima guerra mondiale, ma anche il modo di combattere, dove si trincerava, dove la guerra era molto statica. In questo caso ha cercato di creare un wargame molto vicino alla Prima Guerra Mondiale. Vado adesso a fare la terza domanda a David, così sappiamo benissimo che quando parliamo, David, when we speak about the First World War and we try to research, to look for some good mechanics, well, generally the first war game that comes to our minds is Paths of Glory. In fact, I found many similarities, but also some good difference between your creation, your game, and Paths of Glory. Well, can you explain this sort of relationship that you had with Paths of Glory and a famous designer like Ted Racer? You're up.
Yes. And if you have played Paths of Glory and later played Crusade and Revolution, you will see that the games are brothers.
Yeah.
Because I took Paths of Glory as my base. All the main mechanics, all the rules are the same, and that was very useful because I liked the game, and also having a solid game, a solid rules that have been tested and that people like me, was the very, very good beginning for the game. But later, of course, even if I had those strong and useful roots, I had to build the game, and there was a lot of work because the map was completely different, and also I had to introduce all the events had to be, of course, different, and the wars, even if as you have said, the style of war was similar, but it was a completely different war because, for example, the Spanish Civil War, as probably you know, started as a failed coup. So the rebels rised against the government, but they were not success.
Yes, that's true.
But also the government couldn't destroy or to take the control of the country. So after
we can speak
days,
of a standstill.
The country was divided, and both sides weren't prepared for a war. So they had to begin building armies. At the beginning, there were only few thousand of combatants, of soldiers, volunteers in each side, and later they had to develop armies. And at the end, when the war was complete, at this peak, both armies had about 1 million or more men with the arms. So I had to introduce rules to show those kind of particularities on the game. But yes, I begin with Paths of Glory, but if you play later Crusade and Revolution, you will find that yes, the rules, if you know one rules, you have nearly all the job done to study the rule book, but you will find many differences that give the special flavor to the game. I will mention that this also happened with other games of this family. If you have played Paths of Glory, there are other games based on Path of Glory and that happen exactly the same. Barbarossa to Berlin,
yeah.
Shifting Sands, Pursuit of Glory, and the last one, and Illusion of Glory, for example. And that is a good point, I think, that players know that after playing one of those games, you have, for example, about 80% of the job done when you have to study the new game. You can focus on the differences, and they actually are very different different games, even if they share the same rules.
Well, thank you, David. I'm going to translate into Italian. I'm going also to sum up what you told. Well, penso che abbiate capito, ma vado a riassumere. In realtà Crusade Revolution e Pazzo Glory sono fratelli, non sono nemmeno cugini, sono molto stretti, ma allo stesso modo, malgrado siano molto vicini, ma c'è stato molto da lavorare sulla Spanish Civil War. Perché? Perché poi ha avuto uno sviluppo diverso rispetto alla Prima Guerra Mondiale. Quindi David ha dovuto lavorare su questi eventi storici e riportarli a livello di gioco, quindi molto vicini, ma allo stesso tempo c'è stato bisogno di molto lavoro per quanto riguarda lo sviluppo. Ha fatto un esempio che l'inizio della guerra civile spagnola è stato un colpo di stato non riuscito completamente, che ha portato una sorta di di stallo, e da lì è cominciata la building della guerra. Ecco, in questo caso possiamo dire che il building della guerra è stato molto simile alla Prima Guerra Mondiale. Possiamo individuare 3 periodi anche nella Spanish Civil War, però è chiaro che le differenze storiche tra Prima Guerra Mondiale e Spanish Civil War hanno costretto David a fare un grosso lavoro di analisi e individuare soprattutto gli eventi da mettere nel gioco in qualità di carte. Poi abbiamo citato, per finire, altri card driven come Shifting Sands, come Barbarossa to Berlin, come Illusions Glory, che sono molto simili a Pazzo Glory, ma anche loro richiedono chiaramente un'analisi diversa per quanto riguarda lo sviluppo dell'intero gioco. Poi qualcuno posso aggiungere è riuscito, qualcuno un po' meno. Posso dire che Shifting Sands è uscito molto bene, Barbarossa to Berlin è uscito un pochino male, ma quello dipende anche probabilmente che forse il sistema Pazzo Glory non si addiceva molto a Barbarossa to Berlin. E David, I have just illustrated what you have told about, but now we know perfectly that we have a sort of deluxe edition coming soon from Commas Games. You told me exactly that we have already had a second edition, but it's only a reprint. On the contrary, by considering this deluxe edition, what can we say about? What are the differences that we are going to find with the old version?
Well, first, I must say that the graphic artist, the graphic art, is the same. Both games, the first edition from 2013 and now the one from the last year, this is a reprint, as you have said. The art is the same. I'm very happy with the art.
The artist is Nicolas Scubi. Yeah.
Yeah. He's also a Spaniard. He lives in Bilbao, another city that, of course, appears in the map.
Athletic Bilbao, yes.
Football.
You never win the championship. I'm sorry.
And the quality of the components have been upgraded a lot.
I see.
If you compare the boxes, you will see that the second edition, the box is larger, because the map and the counters are 20% bigger than in the previous version. They are bigger. That the result is very nice. People also are happy with the bigger counters, because some wargamers, we are getting older, our eyes are also older, and sometimes people are happy if the counters are bigger, so you can see better all the numbers and letters. The map is mounted, because the first map, the first edition, it was a paper map, and the cards are the same, because the cards were in the first edition were very good, and the size is the standard size, so they are the same in the second edition. And finally, the rule book and the playbook. I am also very proud of the,
You're right.
of the rulebook and especially the playbook. We will talk about it later. And now it is only one booklet, very big booklet in color. That is the first edition. The booklets were separated, and now they are the same but in color. It was in black and white in the first edition. But the most important thing that I want to underline, because this was important for me, the game is still the same. I mean, if you own the first edition, you can play the game perfectly. I wanted to keep the game the same because the game hasn't changed. Fortunately, after so much playtesting, the game is solid. So to play the first edition and second edition are exactly the same. We have only introduced some optional, I repeat, optional rules and cards and counters in the second edition, but they are optional, and that is second edition. I am very, very happy with second edition.
Well, I see. Vado a tradurre. David, I'm going to translate quickly what you have just said. In ogni caso, penso che abbiate capito, abbiamo avuto una prima edizione, una reprint, ma questa è una deluxe perché? Perché in ogni caso mantiene completamente quello, le meccaniche e qualsiasi regola che abbiamo trovato nelle due precedenti edizioni. Ma che cosa poi è migliorato? I materiali, qualche componente chiaramente, la mappa è rimasta invariata e soprattutto David ha voluto sottolineare che ci sono delle optional rules, ci sono dei counters nuovi e il manuale sarà a colori. Cosa? I'm going to say that in English. I find the idea to use the colors for the manual is a very good idea. In fact, if we want to move, if you want to criticize a little the previous package, is just about the black and white booklet instead of having a color booklet. So good idea. This decision to produce an illustrated and colorful manual. Stavo dicendo. Ecco, quindi chi ha giocato già la prima e la seconda edizione non avrà problemi in questa deluxe. And David, I'm going to make a sort of provocative question, but do we need to buy the deluxe edition? What's your opinion?
If you own the first edition, it's unnecessary.
Well,
you know, players sometimes we want to own all the new games, and sometimes if you have one game and you like it, and there is a new edition, obviously, if you like the game, you will find a lot of better things, quality, better
yes.
components in the new one. But if you ask me, that's why I underlined that the game is still the same. Because I hate also that sometimes second editions destroy previous edition.
It's true.
Do you know what I am talking about?
Yeah.
You have a game and the second edition suddenly change a lot of things. Maybe it was necessary, but I think that it is a bit unfair for the people who spent their money in the previous edition. So 7 years have passed, 8 now from the 8 years from the first edition, but it was important for me to be able to say to people who own the first edition that they can keep it and they can play it because it's exactly the same. And I created a very small file. It is in Boagin Geek, showing only a pair of corrections that you have to make and a new scenario. you print it, and you have your game completely updated. So, do you need to buy it if you own the first edition? No, it's unnecessary. If you want the better components, if you want those optional cards and counters, you could buy it. But of course, I think that this edition is especially for people who don't own first edition. That edition was out of stock, so this is especially for the people who wanted to buy the game and they couldn't find it.
Well, thank you, David. Bene, penso che abbiate capito. In ogni caso, vedete, è sempre la solita decisione. Ho già una precedente edizione, perché devo comprare quella nuova? Beh, i collezionisti secondo me la compreranno a prescindere. Ma in ogni caso, chi non la possiede, we are also collectors, so we are going to buy absolutely this edition. But stavo aggiungendo, ma in ogni caso penso che non sono state vendute così tante copie di Crusade Revolution. Porto la mia esperienza personale, sì, lo possiedo, ma non ho avuto mai modo di giocarlo, quindi sono convinto che facendo un attimo di analisi del gioco, se il gioco è valido, merita di essere acquistato, soprattutto per coloro che non lo possiedono. I'm saying, David, that I hope that this sort of endorsement, this analysis, can drive people to buy your game. If this game is valid, I'm sure that a lot of people will run to buy it. E quindi ragazzi, secondo me non dedicheremo solo questo episodio a Crusade Revolution, ma dato che David, I've been playing Paths of Glory for 20 years and more. I'm very tired to play Paths of Glory. So, if I'll realize that Crusade Revolution works, I'm going to play a lot Crusade Revolution, and precisely, I'm going to dedicate a couple of episodes to illustrate the mechanics and to play a couple of turns live to let the people understand more about Crusade Liberation. Please remember that sometimes the mechanics coming from Paths of Glory are not so difficult. The difficult part is when the players have to discover a winning strategy. That's the problem. Just today, nowadays, we have still players that are looking for a good strategy to run during Paths of Glory. And I think that it's the same regarding Crusade Revolution. So often players need to understand, yes, I have acquired all the rules. And now, in fact, David, there was a listener, Luca Bortolussi, that was making a question about, at the beginning, the Republican faction seems a little in trouble. So I need to discover a good strategy to save the Republicans from the complete defeat. That's the problem, you know. And since there is this new deluxe edition, and it's an occasion to discover Crusade Revolution, we are in the following episodes dedicated to Crusade Revolution, we are going to explain something about the strategy, you know. So I think that you must buy Crusade Revolution. Why? Because if I have well understood, albeit I haven't played a complete campaign of Crusade Revolution, I think that the game, in spite of an apparent, starting weakness of the Republican, seems a little balanced. Anyway, I'm going to discover that in the future. David, let's continue with our interview, with our chatting, by considering a negative comment that I recorded coming from Board Game Geek about a guy that wrote, "It's nothing but hand management, keeping cannon fodder in those mountains, and then dance of death." Well, how would you reply to this criticism?
Well, first, maybe I would need more information. I mean, I would like to see how does this person play, because after so many years of play testing, if one thing I have learned during these years, after so many hundreds and hundreds of plays, and the most important thing with many different players, is that the human factor is key in a game. Because maybe I suppose that this has happened to you and the other people who is listening the interview. You play a game, you think that you know how to play well that game, and suddenly you have played always with the same people or with a small group of players, and suddenly you will play with another person, or you see a game played by other people, and suddenly you see that your strategy was not the best one, that there may be a different type of play and movements. And I have seen this many times. Today, I still listen to people saying that it's impossible to win with one side, and the next day I listen to other people saying exactly the opposite, that it is impossible to win with the other side. This is good, of course, because if only one side was winning, it would be a problem. But even if I need more information, I would say that hand management, that surprised me, because you have played Paths of Glory a lot, and you know that in car driving games, hand management and the car management is maybe the most maybe not the most important, but it's among the most important things in the game.
It's true, absolutely.
You have to know carefully what to do when you're with your hand. It's a game inside the game, you know, trying to remove the low quality cards and knowing when to play one event, knowing that if you don't play it, maybe you don't know when will it come back, things like that. So hand management for me is one of the most enjoyment aspects of car driving games. The cannon fodder, well, it is true that, as I have said, the Spanish Civil War is quite similar in some aspects to, or many aspects to, First World War. So it is true that sometimes you can create very powerful defensive positions, and especially where you have to resist, and you can put more and more units and try to resist there. But that is something that historically happened. The problem is that you cannot do that in all the front. For example, with the Republican, that is the defensive side, it has to be on a defensive position along all the game, but knowing when to launch counteroffensives, you have to know where you must defend and where you can give terrain to gain time. So that is another very important part of the game. And finally, the Dance of the Dead.
Dance of Death.
That is a very interesting aspect. Yeah, because this is something that since my first game in Paths of Glory, I saw that the Dance of the Dead was a true problem in that game.
That's true.
I suppose that most of us has suffered sometimes a distraction, you leave a hole in your front, the enemy enters, moving a lot in your your territory, and leaving your armies without supply, and that usually ends quickly the game. I don't like it. I mean, there is people who are happy with that way of playing. They like all the maneuvers and trying to create a hole and enter with their armies. But I don't like it. I think that is something that Ted Brazier has corrected later in his other card driving games, and that profound breakthroughs in World War I, they are a bit excessive, in my opinion. That's why I introduced a rule in Crusade and Revolution not allowing to enter more than 2 spaces in enemy territory in one round. That way, it's not possible to make those amazing breakthroughs that sometimes we see in Paths of Glory. And also, units that are out of supply are destroyed at the end of your 6th round, because this is a problem that also happens in Paths of Glory, when at the end of the turn the out of supply units are destroyed, so the allies had an strange advantage, because they play in the last round, they could leave the enemy units out of supply and they were destroyed without any possibility for the player. Anyway, last word. During the playtesting, I have played with all kind of players, and I have tested all kind of strategies. And I can say that I have friends with like all the maneuver, the movement, and always move and try to create holes and win through the dance of the death. And I can say that strategy, the same in Paths of Glory, can be you can counter it. You can play in a way that cancels that strategy. You must play carefully and you cannot commit mistakes, but trust me, we have tested it and you can avoid that danger in Crusade and Revolution. Also in Paths of Glory, but in Paths of Glory it's a bit more difficult because I have mentioned those problems in the rules.
Well, thank you, David. I'm going to sum up quickly what you have just said. Prima di tutto, ragazzi, David ha risposto a questa, diciamo, critica, che potrebbe essere anche vera o meno, giustamente bisognerebbe sapere anche che tipo di giocatore è questo che ha dato questo giudizio. Però ecco, ci siamo soffermati molto è un card driven, signori. Il card driven, chi ha giocato tanto i card driven sa benissimo che in questo caso è certo che si tratta di saper valutare quando è il caso di giocare una carta o meno come evento o come ops, perché guardate, quando avete raggiunto l'abilità di capire durante il gioco che sia Crusade Revolution, che sia Paths of Glory, che sia Shifting Sands o altri, la cosa principale da capire è: ma devo gioco l'evento o gioco gli ops? Cioè, è questo il problema grande dei card driven. E scusate signori, è proprio il card management. È quasi ovvio che si debba stare attenti. Ho una carta che mi dà un punto vittoria, ma devo giocarla adesso come punto vittoria, oppure è meglio che ora mi chiudo la linea del fronte, perché così mi collego alla linea del fronte. David ha detto una cosa, che questa Dance of Death in Paths of Glory non piaceva a nessuno. Tanto è vero che noi quando giochiamo in torneo usiamo il warning out of supply, pay attention, are you sure about your move, sei sicuro sulla tua mossa, please close the gap, quello è un problema. E quindi lui ha detto: non si può muovere più di 2 esagoni in foreign terrain, in enemy terrain, quello lui l'ha fatto per limitare. ma vi ripeto, ormai in tutti i tornei there is a sort of gentleman agreement. Attenzione, pay attention. Perché? Perché a nessuno, no one loves winning by using the dance of death. That's the problem. I don't like winning at the third turn on a game as I'm able to cut the supply lines. That's a problem. So I want to win by using a good strategy. That's the fact. So I appreciate what David did nel suo gioco, in his game, about this no more than 2 spaces in enemy territory. E soprattutto poi Cannon Fodder, ragazzi, chi ha giocato Pazzo Gloria e similari, abbiamo una marea di perdite. Attenzione, it depends on the players, dipende dai giocatori. Ci sono giocatori that keep fighting, keep attacking, and other players, ci sono altri giocatori che, just a moment, I don't want to attack now, I want to play the event and then I'm going to attack. It depends on the players, dipende dai giocatori. Potete farlo diventare voi un Cannon Fodder game o meno. Vi ripeto, io sto parlando per averlo appena analizzato, quindi è vero o falso, però in questo caso abbiamo parlato di 3 variabili che si trovano in tutti i card driven. Quindi sì, hand card management, it's obvious, guys, you know. And please remember, you have to know when it's the moment to play an operation or it's better playing the event. Guys, it's quite easy, apparently, you know. And David, but let's put aside, David, we have been speaking for 45 minutes, so a lot of time. Anyway, we are going to close this nice chat. David, you were a teacher in the elementary school, you know, or...
No, it was not, the typical or the normal school.
Yeah.
It was a place for the young people, but in the afternoons, an open place where they can, in their free time, go to, we made a lot of things with them.
I see.
It was not, I was not exactly a teacher. That's why I said social educator.
I see. Well, anyway, please remember that, David, our association is, Casus Belli, is very involved in teaching and also exploring different didactic methods by using the word games and similar. First of all, I find Crusade Liberation a very good word game to teach the Spanish Civil War, absolutely, by considering the cards, but also by considering the booklet. The playbook is very good. If we want to understand something more about these 3 years that have characterized the history of Spain. So, what do you think? A simple question. What do you think about the possibility, the chance to use word games in a typical classroom?
I agree with you that it is something that can be used very, very useful with lots of possibilities. So yes, without any doubt, games can be used in the schools. I used games in the center where I worked with young people or children from 10 years old to 17.
Yeah.
So and games worked very good with them. In the schools, I know also I have some friends that are teachers and they are also using games. So especially to teach history and to learn history in a different way, war games, I think that can be used, of course, and that they may be very, very useful. And thanks for mentioning the booklet, the playbook, because another thing I I thought from the very, very beginning is that I wanted a very good playbook in the game, because sometimes games only include rules, and I think that there should always be also a historical comment, and especially in a car driving game, every car should have at least a pair of lines. And I dedicated a lot of work, a lot of efforts. The playbook has nearly 70 or 60, 70 pages. There is a brief history of the Spanish Civil War. There are notes for every car, and there are 110 cards and 10 more in the new edition. And of course, apart from that, many examples of play, examples of combat, advices for the novice player. So I think that the historical part is the one that makes our games, our hobby, special. Otherwise, there are many, many war games. Now we are in a golden age of war games in general. But what makes war games different is that they allow us reliving history. So I think that the importance of history should appear in games. So I expect that people will like that playbook, and I think so, but because many players have told me, and I am happy because I dedicated, as I have said, a lot of effort to it. And it's a good first step. If you are interested on the topic, later you will be able to read more books and know more about the subject. That is something that I think that all war gamers do in one or another way. Maybe we are interested about one historical event and later we play a game about it, or we may also play a game that creates a new interest about a subject, and later you can read books about it. So yes, I agree with you, and that is something that more people should have into account.
Well, thank you, David. Beh, ovviamente non si può che essere d'accordo sull'utilità del wargame come strumento didactic tool, come strumento didattico, e giustamente David sottolineava che il playbook, I agree with David, è veramente una fonte di notizia storica. In fact, I think, David, that the playbook is really well done. I want always to find a playbook in each wargame. It's not always true, but it's always a good thing. Why? Because beyond playing we can learn something more. Quindi diciamo il playbook l'abbiamo sottolineato l'importanza, poi ricordatevi che nell'edizione deluxe sarà a colori, quindi avrete anche insomma modo di apprezzarlo ancora di più, e poi per completare David ha parlato di una golden age. David, by considering what you have just said about a golden age, well, in Italy we have been living surely a golden age. Can we say the same? Can we affirm the same as regarding Spain? What's your opinion?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you compare the hobby, for example, 20 years ago, in all the things, I think that we are better, and for example, there are much more games, there are more players, and also clubs or associations and conventions. So if you consider all those aspects, you will see that in all of them we have grew up, and now we are living a golden age, as I have said. And we can see it also. And I forgot to say also podcasts and video programs like this one, blogs, all those kind of new methods of communication. Videos, for example. Well, I saw that Stuka Joe, a good friend from Puerto Rico, is watching us.
Stuka Joe has posted. David has just posted. By considering your game is a great, it's a great game, a polished game. By considering the mechanics.
He's an example of another person who communicates and creates a lot of very good information and stuff about war games. So yes, I think that some people think that there is few young people, that there will be a problem to renew the players, that we need more young people. But I want to be positive. Players will come. The important thing is that we are now living that very good and sweet moment, and we have to enjoy it and be happy.
Davide, I'm going to translate into Italian, in short. Beh, ovviamente sì, è vero, stiamo vivendo a second golden age, I'd say. Please remember that we have already had a first golden age. Abbiamo già avuto una golden age in the late 70s, first years of 80s. So this is a second golden age, longer. I hope that we are not entering the dark ages. Why? Because after the golden ages there is always c'è sempre un'età oscura. I hope not. Ma in ogni caso, ecco, anche in Spagna, also in Spain, ci sono molti giocatori, molte nuove associazioni. Ricordo, I want to highlight the Badajoz convention. Please forgive me for my pronunciation. Badajoz or Badajoz? What about the right pronunciation? Badajoz. Well, I find some problem in this J, you know. Well, in ogni caso, ecco, a very good convention, I think. There were a lot of American designers that attended this convention, che hanno partecipato a questa convention. And David, last but not least, what about if you want to tell that, what about your next war game? Any idea in your drawer of dreams? What about the future? What do we have to expect about?
Yes, I am working in another game. It's not a secret. I mean, I announced it 1 or 1.5 years ago, and it's another game about quite unknown event in Spanish history.
Yeah.
That is the first Carlist War.
Carlist War. Yeah.
Yeah. It's another civil war. I think that I'm focused on the same subject. But it's another thing that I am interested on, and I also think that we have, and it's good, many games about some concrete subjects. For example, Second World War,
well, a lot of
but First World War, and battles, and it's good. And I think that if more people continue making games, it's good, because you always can discover a new point of view, a new scale, something that makes the game different and interesting. But I think that if some of the designers have interest about quite unknown or dark subjects, it would be good to design new games about them. And that's why I decided to choose that war, which was very, very important at that time. It was along all Europe, you know, in the 19th century, there were sometimes war or rebellions. That, the fight between the ancien regime, the old system, the old monarchies, the absolutism, and the new liberal the more modern governments and the new political points of view. That happened along all Europe, also in Italy, of course. And in Italy, we have the interest in wars combined with the creation, the construction of the nation. So all those things in Spain also happened, and this was a very fierce and long war, 7 years.
Yeah.
It happened in all Spain, but focused on the north, where the rebels, the absolutists that wanted to change the monarchy, they have Don Carlos. That's why the name Carlist is the fighters that wanted to put Carlos, the brother of the previous king, wanted to put him in the throne. And it is very interesting, and we are now playtesting it. As you know, it took me 10 years to publish Crusade and Revolution.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know what time will we need now, but what I know is that I want to playtest it very carefully. There is no date. I have a publisher, a Spanish publisher called Bellica Third Generation. It's a Spanish publisher that has agreed to publish it, but we don't have any date. We will continue working on it, playtesting it. Thanks to there is a basal module that helps us a lot in these times of COVID epidemic, and I expect to have good news in the next years.
I see. Well, David, to complete what you have just said, it's quite interesting, the choice about these Carlist wars. Why? Because we are not tired of playing so many war games about the Second World War, about the Napoleonic period. That's not a problem. But in Europe, and it's very important, several designers have moved their interest in typical European wars that are at the same time important, but obviously these wars don't interest the American audience or the American average players. So a good choice, I think. Well, unfortunately, it's not for the market. Why? Because a game about Normandy could sell a lot of boxes. On the contrary, I'm not so sure if a war game about the Carlist Wars will sell a lot of boxes. Well, anyway, it's very important, this sort of European movement by considering designers that are focusing on typical European facts that in every case are appealing or better the European wargamers. I repeat, I play a lot of Normandy and Ardennes war games, but it's very interesting approach other minor wars that are not so minor in every case, but at least we can play something more and something above all of different by using different mechanics. I'm going to translate, David. Dicevo, ecco, David ha spiegato che sta dedicandosi a questo titolo sempre ambientato in Spagna, sulle guerre carliste. Ovviamente è una bella cosa che dedica molto tempo al playtest. Una cosa che non ho detto su Crusade Liberation, che se andate a leggere l'elenco dei playtester è veramente lungo. Perché? Perché a me piace questa accuratezza e non lo possiamo dire per tutti i wargame in circolazione, spesso e volentieri si spacciano wargame per grandi riuscite, ma in realtà sono stati playtestati pochi, ce ne accorgiamo veramente più tardi. E invece giustamente mi piace questo, dedichiamo tempo al playtest perché vogliamo prodotti che funzionino e di qualità. Ecco perché you should trust Crusade Liberation. If you notice, guys, I'm going to show you the list about the playtesters that tested Crusade and Revolution. let me take the list about the playtester. Well, please see, you know, guys. Well, these well, at least 70, 80 players, I don't know, but they have playtested the Crusade Liberation, and not always we find a so high number of playtester in many wargames. Non troviamo tanti playtester in altri wargames. So, well, good job, David, about this decision to playtest also a sort of different title as the Carlist War. Well, David, we are tired. I think that you are tired too. So, time to close our connection. Anyway, I'm going to set my view. Well, I think that we did a good job, and I hope that is not the last connection. Why? Because I repeat, David, I'm going to tell something more about the mechanics of this Crusade Revolution, and I can tell that I'm going to dedicate a complete series of videos about Let's Play Crusade Revolution. Obviously, it's very hard to broadcast, to shoot videos in Italian and English. Well, a lot of time. At first, I'm going to shoot that in Italian, and then I hope also in English. Anyway, David, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your time, and I hope to meet you one day in Spain. Thank you, David.
Grazie mille a tutti i giocatori italiani.
Grazie, David. Un abbraccio. Hugs. Well, I'm going to removing you from the stream. Well, ok ragazzi, abbiamo salutato David, è stato molto molto gentile, abbiamo avuto un'ora di collegamento. Paolo stava dicendo hasta la vista hermano. Con questo vi saluto, siamo già a un'ora e 10 di trasmissione, vado prima a interrompere la diretta video. Spero di essere stato chiaro, sapete che la diretta delle volte per stare attento a telecamere e cose varie. Non ho avuto modo di spiegare le meccaniche del gioco, ma dato che mi sono divertito un mondo, perché l'ho detto, sono stanco, ho giocato così tante partite a Pazzo Glory che non ce la faccio più, ma ho visto in Crusade Revolution un germe di Pazzo Glory, quindi che cosa farò? E giustamente me lo andrò a piazzare, ma come avete già visto, anche se oggi una telecamera mi ha lasciato a piedi, vi faccio vedere, vedete, ho una telecamera che mi ha lasciato a piedi, l'altra grazie a Dio mi ha salvato, e andrò sicuramente a dedicare qualche puntatina a Crusade Liberation, ma non posso farlo da domani perché, signori miei, ho bisogno di tempo per, più che di capire le regole, che vi ripeto sono abbastanza smooth, abbastanza semplici, ma di capire come si gioca, beh, qui ce ne vuole un pochettino. E ringrazio i nostri video spettatori, ci vediamo lunedì sarà un assolo. Vediamo un po' cosa andare a presentare riguardo un gioco singolo, ci sarò solo io in diretta. Mercoledì saremo sicuramente con Paolo Carraro e venerdì, dato che mi sto divertendo a cercare designers in giro per il mondo, avremo Philippe Hardy e andremo ad analizzare un prodotto di Philippe Hardy che ho conosciuto, ragazzi, 10 giorni fa. Cortés, però conoscevo il suo gioco perché l'avevo dovuto, diciamo, aprire per quanto riguarda proprio quel periodo e stavo cercando di capire quanti wargame ci fossero su l'epoca della conquista del Sud America. Ora interrompo la live, ci vediamo lunedì come al solito alle 18:30 con Giannizzero Nero video. Ciao ragazzi, interrompo la diretta. Di nuovo, ciao e buon fine settimana. Bene signori, ecco, ho avuto bisogno di 2 secondi per non fare confusione, perché poi per tirare avanti l'intervista, controllare le telecamere e tradurre, delle volte vado in confusione, però ci sono riuscito. Vi ringrazio, saluto Tony con cui ho avuto modo di parlare via email E Tony, dimmi poi anche di questo su Walkie Gap, che per me è un buon gioco, non è proprio poi la fine del mondo, ma è un buon gioco. Ciao Max, grazie per essere intervenuto. Luca, per quanto riguarda la strategia ne riparleremo, perché non intendo mettere da parte presto questo gioco. Sì, Damiano, secondo me, se l'impressione è corretta, devo dire che Crusade è un buon sistema, però vi ripeto, sto parlando per impressione. Ciao Claudio, grazie per essere stato presente, un abbraccio a Luca, speriamo Luca di vederci presto a Biella. Ciao Diego, sempre presente, ti ringrazio per la tua fedeltà. Vado con la solita sigla di Dance of the U-Boat di Akash Gandhi. Ciao e ci vediamo lunedì, buon fine settimana.